Welcome back, everyone, to Red Spotlight. I'm your host, Alexis Soto, and I'm joined today by me, myself, and I, here on Red Spotlight. This is going to be episode number 471. Evidently, I have been abandoned by my panelists, the usual people who are here, in order to go see The Lord of the Rings, evidently having some kind of run on theaters, and so it's just going to be me here, and this is going to be the final episode in the lead up to the nominations being announced on Tuesday morning for the, I believe they're the 96th Academy Awards. I'm not even sure if I said my name at the top. I'm Alexis. Of course, if you watch or listen to the show, you know who I am at this point. And you know, of course, what this show is, the place that brings you everything coming out of the world of movies and more. And of course, these last few weeks and months have been some pretty seismic events for movies, of course, because we're in the midst of awards season. And yeah, we're kind of getting down to the home stretch here. We've had a couple of awards, but we're now getting to the final nominees. And we're going to be able to get a chance to see who it was that was selected for the final round here for the biggest show, of course, which is the Oscars. And it's kind of funny because if you're not aware of the fact, well, I said 5 a.m. because, or 5:30, I think, because they have this really strange tradition of just deciding that the best time of the day to announce what those nominees should be are literally that early in the morning. Although I think that the reason for why that even is because if you think about it in the East Coast, 5 a.m. is basically 8 a.m. over there. And so I guess for them it's not that out of the ordinary, but for us here who are in the West Coast, it's really inconvenient, I would say. But I don't, well, I shouldn't say I don't. And for the last 2 years, I think I've gone to the trouble of like actually waking up, because I am one of those people who just likes to see what is announced early. Not for all of the awards, but for this one in particular, because I feel like if you've been following this show, I mean that show, for quite some time, you will know that there are always a bit of surprises in categories that you at least expected and with names that you at least expected from. So what we're going to do today is just have a conversation about what we think that's going to look like, who we think is kind of like ahead in the game right now, who's in danger of like being left out, and any other kinds of rants that I'm sure you are more than familiar with if you are a longtime listener and viewer of this show. So yeah, that's where we are at today. So the last podcast that we had was kind of like this deep dive into the history of the Golden Globes and why a lot of us on this channel, really do like them more so than any of the other people in the space. But then we also had a whole review of the show, why that failed. Also, what we thought of the winners, and we kind of went through the category by category basis of like, what won, what lost, and where we kind of felt where things were going. And a couple of things have actually, well, not a couple, a lot of things have happened since that particular podcast. I know that at the time of the recording, it was recorded at least a few days after the show, and we had already gotten the SAG nominations and I believe the PGA nominations. And DGA nominations. But the big thing that has happened between then and now are, well, the Critics' Choice Awards happened, and then, of course, the BAFTA nominees were announced. And I guess it's fitting, honestly, that this is the particular time that I'm going to go ahead and talk about these two, and that I'm just alone because I don't really feel that anybody else in this channel really has the kind of hatred I have for both the Critics' Choice and for both BAFTA for various reasons. I guess this is what it must feel like to be a Globes hater, because I really do despise BAFTA and Critics' Choice. Like, I was actually listening to a podcast earlier today. I think it was on Christian Harloff's channel. I think John Roca, who, I don't necessarily, again, I don't go out of my way to hate watch certain personalities. I actually do enjoy a fair amount of the commentary that Harloff and Roca have to offer. Even oftentimes when I find myself completely at odds with what they feel and what they think. But I fully believe that Roca believes that the organizations that he belongs to are, at least in spirit, attempting to really be a reputable group that people should take seriously and that have a lot more weight and impact as far as this award season is concerned. And the scandal kind of broke out with the Hollywood Creative Alliance, which were formerly known as the Hollywood Critics Association, which also has a lot of overlap with the Critics' Choice Awards. Not completely, but there is some overlap there. And evidently there were some, I believe the Critics' Choice ended up reaching out to all of their members that if they also happen to have a membership to Hollywood Creative Alliance, that they need to pick one or the other, because they claim they received information from one of the studios that the head of the HCA, Scott Menzel, had evidently suggested or insinuated that he may be able to influence the voting per se, if he were able to... I'm not too familiar with the particulars, but it was very much a quid pro quo situation that I'm sure is very commonplace in anywhere that's America and anywhere that's the world and anywhere that's really infiltrated and motivated by money and influence and power. And that's kind of what we all are. So it's like it's really a tale of all the time. It's not anything new. It's not really surprising in the least. But yeah, there were also I guess some people who were bringing drinks to celebrities at the Critics' Choice Awards and ended up, I don't know, being connected to this in some way. I'm not quite sure myself, honestly. But the idea is that the Critics' Choice was so outraged by this decision, and right now nothing seems to have come of it. And I don't seemingly believe that there's any kind of, change that may or may not be happening, but I just feel that it's rich that this particular organization and their affiliations are finding themselves in some kind of scandal that isn't also dissimilar from the scandal that kind of rocked, or not necessarily that particular scandal, but some of the scandals that have rocked the globe's history throughout the last few decades. It once again, I think in real time, validates our group and what we have said, and what particularly I said last week, and that, all of these particular people are kind of the same. And I just feel like it is really naive to pretend that every organization did not exactly function as the Globes. And I've also said that the Critics' Choice themselves, now as a separate thing, Roca went on Harloff's show recently, and he was praising the Critics' Choice as saying that they're the group that is known for, bucking whichever way the wind is blowing, and then they pick who they like and don't necessarily take anything else into consideration. And I no doubt believe that he feels that way, and maybe the people who he is familiar with who are in that critics group also themselves feel that way. But that isn't necessarily what the history of the Critics' Choice has really shown us. There's a reason why a lot of people were actually predicting that in the lead up to the awards, they may even split Best Picture with Oppenheimer and Barbie, because they are the organization that has the most ties. It's kind of funny because I had mentioned last week that the Globes, or the old Globes, would have to sit with each other, all of them, watch it together, and then discuss. And I think more so than anybody else, they were the ones who were really talking to each other about like how they were going to come to the nominations and who they were going to award. But it seems like with the Critics' Choice, more of that may have been happening because of all of these ties. There was that year where Glenn Close and Lady Gaga tied for Best Actress because they didn't want to commit to one or the other, and both could have won for the Oscar. And that's one of the other things that they're so preoccupied with, is being known as the ones who predict, or the most predictive of whichever way the Academy is going to go. Which, I mean, may or may not happen. I mean, we'll see if Saltburn gets a Best Picture nomination. It's not obviously gonna happen. There was another year, of course, where they revealed their 10 best films, and then a week later they had to go meet and change their minds to add one more film, an 11th film, which in and of itself was unprecedented, but it ended up being The Force Awakens because they didn't get the screening in time, and they were all seemingly convinced that it was going to be assured of an Oscar nomination, and they weren't the only ones, but because they're most concerned with being the most predictive, they were like, well, we got to go back and add this one in. And again, this is the group that keeps their voting open until after the Globes have happened so that they can, see the playing field and gauge for themselves whether or not they want to go along with what has won, or if they want to go a different way. So I don't buy this idea that somehow the Critics' Choice or a noble group, and I'm not at all surprised that scandal has broken out, and I welcome the mountain of crap that is heading their way, especially because as a show, I do gotta say, they've always kind of been quite boring. And even Roca himself said it on his show, The Hot Mic, with Snyder, which is he himself, to his credit, said that he felt some kind of revulsion on his part of this notion. The one time he did go to the Critics' Choice, which was back in 2019, he mentioned, but this idea that these critics are sitting alongside these filmmakers, these actors who, and then they spend the entirety of the show going up to them and having, pictures and selfies, and the critics are supposed to be, ideally anyway, impartial. There's no such thing, but ideally they're supposed to at least give off the appearance of that. And he had said on his show that he was really taken aback by that and really didn't want to be a part of that whole scene. But I would just say that as a presentation, the Critics' Choice Awards have never really had any kind of identity. Really, I've been watching award shows all of my life, but these particular movie award shows, the Golden Globes, Screen Actors Guild, the Critics' Choice, the Oscars, I've been watching those for just about 10 years now, maybe even a little more than that. And I think, to me, all of them have their distinctive characteristics and quirks, but this broadcast, not so much. And I think they've been on different networks. They've tried different things. It doesn't help that they host their ceremony in this large airport hangar, and there's just so much noise. So it's a huge space. It doesn't help that there were so many categories that half of them are announced, as either, I think they're announced during the commercial break, or as they go to commercial break, they announce like 5 categories. Like, oh, Oppenheimer won these 5 awards, or oh, Barbie won these 4 awards, which actually did happen, by the way. And then that doesn't even get into the TV prizes that weren't even presented on air. So that's also just kind of like not cool. So yeah, it's just like, it's very bland. And I got to commend Chelsea Handler for trying to give it some kind of flavor. I think on some level she succeeded, but on the whole, it's a snooze. I was planning on watching the whole thing. I ended up only watching, I think, 45 minutes, or the last or so 45 minutes, and it was very boring. I will say, though, it wasn't as boring as the Emmys, which were the following day. And good God, if you thought I seemed exhausted of the idea of Succession, The Bear, and Beef winning everything back when it was just the Globes. Well, guess what happened? The Critics' Choice and the Emmys were like literally one day apart, and it was the exact same shows and the exact same people winning the exact same categories. And this again, just ranting off into a different direction. I am getting really tired of these unnecessarily dominating sweeps. It's like, especially, this is why I have such huge issues with these groups when it comes to awarding TV. It's like, you're saying that there were only 3 shows of last year that meant anything? It's so unbelievably boring. The Emmys in and of itself was boring. The Critics' Choice were very boring, and I think the people that were in those rooms themselves were quite bored. I thought what was the funniest part of the night was the Color Purple table. Was kind of like they posted on social media their reactions to getting handed their dinner for being there, which was just a pizza in a bag. It was so bizarre that even what's his name, Paul Giamatti, had referenced that in his acceptance speech later that night. And it was so unbelievable. And they also were given this charcuterie box which didn't really have that much of anything. So even Emily Blunt, I believe, I don't know if she put it on social or someone had gotten a comment from her, and she had mentioned that she was going to take RDJ to In-N-Out Burger later that night, which RDJ also apparently said he had never been. And you got to wonder, what do these celebrities do that you've never been to In-N-Out Burger? That's a strange thing to me. But yeah, evidently that menu was it bombed hard as well. Handler had a decent monologue. I would say if you're gonna compare it to the worst monologue of all time, which was at the Globes, of course it's much better. She got one big laugh when it came to that. She referenced that her writers had. I think she said that, "Thank you for laughing at that. My writers came up with that joke," and of course everybody in the room got what she was talking about. So yeah, but still, it was like probably too long and not necessarily having the bite. I mean, it was unhinged. It was her personality, and I think in and of itself that was fine. But it did not have the bite that I particularly look for in these kind of monologues. So that in and of itself was a wash. And then a lot of the winners are just the same. So again, it was just pretty boring. But there were some seismic differences that kind of really began to turn the race a little bit. In particular with two of the 4 acting categories, and that Paul Giamatti beat Cillian Murphy in actor, and that Emma Stone defeated Gladstone in actress. And it really honestly was looking the night going into it that Cillian and Gladstone might have just been, completely season-long sweepers. And that's not happening. And it didn't happen, at least with that Critics' Choice. Of course, there's still SAG and BAFTA to go before we even get to the Oscars. But when it came to Critics' Choice, those were really needed wins to prevent Gladstone and Murphy from sweeping. It's funny because I do feel that ultimately Murphy and Gladstone are better performances and should win. At the same time, Giamatti and Stone are amazing performances, and they're also deserving of winning. So this is kind of what happens when you have a really stacked year. But it kind of gets your mind thinking about a couple of different things. And this is before we even get to the BAFTA part of it with these two races. Giamatti is endlessly charming on that stage. And he doesn't really say anything that's really of note or really all that interesting, but he just brings this warmth and this charm to him. And he's also just been a veteran, in this industry for such a long time, that it kind of gets your head thinking that this won't necessarily be his first time being nominated. He has been more overlooked. This will also be Cillian Murphy's first Oscar nomination for actor. the thing is, it really does come down to, is Oppenheimer going to be a sweeper the way that Everything Everywhere All at Once was? I think it is. But even if we're going to go with that scenario, I'm thinking it's going to win 9 Oscars, but it also could be a situation where it wins 8, and one of the big losses it has that night would be the actor because of how much love there is for Paul Giamatti. And that's something we got to look out for. And I feel like if I were to be put in a position to seriously pick which one has an edge, I'm thinking it may be Paul. I think it might be his time. And I think if he wins the Screen Actors Guild for Best Actor, that might be all she wrote for that one. Because the SAG in recent years has had amazing influence, in particular to the acting races. Don't forget, last year, Jamie Lee Curtis, out of nowhere, won Supporting Actress. And then because it came after all the other ones, that was most in Oscar voters' minds. And then that ended up being where she won the Academy Award, after all, for Best Supporting Actress that last year. But then again, that was a situation where that movie was so beloved that it literally won 3 out of the 4 acting races. And it won 7 Oscars that night. And Oppenheimer is a much more traditionally accessible film to Academy voters than Everything Everywhere All at Once was, to the point where I'm thinking it's going to at least get 7 or 8 wins. Maybe even 9 if Cillian, in fact, because Cillian could be literally carried over. But it's sad to think that of all the wins, this is going to be the hardest one for it to actually win. And I think, to me, I feel like of all of the things it's going to get, Oppenheimer, this is the one that is easily the most deserving. Perhaps picture, an actor, but I think those are the ones that it truly deserves to win. All the other ones, I mean, there are more than enough alternatives out there for winners. But I do feel that with Cillian, it's kind of like a situation where, like last year, I loved Everything Everywhere All at Once, and I loved the fact that it, won all these things. But to me, it's like more so than even picture or director or screenplay. The things that I think everybody got behind was that it for sure needs to win for supporting actor and for lead actress, because those two are the heart and soul of the film. And more than anything, their wins mattered more, I think, to us in particular than a picture win or a director win. But there was a long while there last year where it really was kind of uncertain if Michelle Yeoh would even be carried along despite or in spite of that movie even winning Best Picture. So that's kind of like what it's going to come down to. It's going to come down to the love for Oppenheimer versus the love for Giamatti. And I think we're gonna have a much better idea, I think, when it comes to when we get closer to the Oscars, because I think at this point where this race is going, it might very well be that Paul ends up winning SAG, but that Murphy, him being a Brit, and him also being the fact that BAFTA literally went out of their way to eliminate all of their contenders, I think there's a really good chance Murphy is going to win the hometown BAFTA. Well, I shouldn't say he's a Brit, but he's around the United Kingdom. It's affiliated with it, so it's like, I don't want to promote Irish erasure here, but you know what I mean here. Last year, Barry Keoghan defeated Ke Huy Quan for supporting actor. Kerry Condon also won. So it's like Banshees did really well. A lot of the cast is United Kingdom affiliated, you could say. So there you go. So yeah. And then actress, it's a different situation. It's actually kind of really interesting because what has happened these last few days has kind of been surprising and at the same time not that surprising, but also at the same time, you're not really quite sure what's behind Lily Gladstone all of a sudden hitting a wall. I will say that I think, to me, if we're going to be in a position where we're thinking critically about, okay, this race and the factors and the conditions that have existed throughout the entirety of this race, I'm going to rewind to my thinking back in November, October, when Lily Gladstone made the choice to switch from running and supporting instead to running the lead actress. And there was this big blow up, including from us here, that she kind of made a terrible decision because she threw away a guaranteed win, similarly to what happened the year before when Michelle Williams threw away a guaranteed win, and instead of running and supporting, she chose to run and lead. And the thing is this, I feel like you only ever get to, I do not dislike Jamie Lee Curtis. I love Jamie Lee Curtis. I love her role in the film. I love that film. I am not one of these people who are like, that's one of the worst winners in that category ever. Was she my pick? No, I feel like literally everybody else in that category was more deserving. I like Angela. She probably should have won. I would not personally have voted for her because I think Stephanie Hsu, Hong Chow, Carrie Condon were far better. But it's semantics. You know, we never would have been talking about Carrie or Angela or Jamie if it wasn't for the fact that Michelle Williams was far more concerned with where the image of her career was going. I feel like, based on what has been speculated, she ultimately felt, Michelle Williams, that it would do some damage to her career if she had remained in supporting and did not want to be seen by Hollywood as a supporting actress only. And so it came down to a decision of optics as to being seen as a leading lady in this business. And she did get the nominations, but she was missing a couple of them. You know, it harmed her. I mean, she herself ended up being snubbed, I believe, by SAG, because of this whole lead supporting switcheroo. I feel like that there are substantial arguments to be made about whether or not certain actors are considered leads or supporting in their Oscar campaigns, but I just feel at the end of the day, an Oscar campaign is first and foremost most concerned with winning. At least it should be. And I feel like, you know, I'm not blaming Michelle Williams for making a personal decision for herself and her career. I understand it, I get it. But I will blame her in the idea that she did a lot more harm than just lose an Oscar and lose literally a Golden Globes award, a SAG award, a Critics' Choice, and a BAFTA. She would have won all of it. The same way Da'Vine Joy Randolph is winning right now, she would have dominated last year. And she threw it away. And I guess the idea to me is, wouldn't your career have benefited if you were known as Academy Award winning Michelle Williams instead of Academy Award nominee Michelle Williams? Yeah, the logic behind this, I don't know. But she hurt her entire film because she cost... So much of this race is shaped by the pundits on their channels and on their podcasts and the voters they're connected with and who they speak with. And they were saying, well, you know, how seriously can we take The Fabelmans as a Best Picture contender if we can't even have at least one guaranteed win of Michelle Williams? If she had remained and if she had kept winning, there would have been more arguments for that film to have remained in the conversation. And when you remain in the conversation, you continue to get nominated, you continue to show up, and it may also manufacture other wins down the line. But she didn't do that. Okay. Anyway, Gladstone has found considerably more fortune in this decision because the critics really showed up for her. She was winning, literally, she was just sweeping the majority of the regional critics' prizes for Best Actress. One particular group, I believe it was LAFCA, they were among the only ones to nominate her for supporting rather than lead, which I guess looking back on that might have been a telltale sign about how some people may be feeling. But it seemed like most people were like, okay, cool. We want to give Lily something because she was great. We like her personally. So we don't even care if it's lead or supporting. We're going to go all in for her. And before the wins started setting in, I just felt really, really unsure of a number of industry people going for that idea because she very clearly is not the lead of that movie. I guess you can make more so an argument that Michelle Williams was more of a lead in Fabelmans, but still, the lead was Gabrielle LaBelle, which, if we could pause real quick, and I'm so glad we're here at this moment because I have some things to say. Because if I don't say it, I'm going to be screaming on the inside for now until the end of time. I still am, no matter what, but I gotta say this. What the fuck? Why is it that Dominic Sessa, who, by the way, is incredible, and turned in one of the absolute best acting debuts anyone's ever seen in The Holdovers, and absolutely should be in the conversation for nominations for supporting actor. Why is it that he is being taken far more seriously, and he is being nominated at places, but Gabrielle LaBelle was not? Gabrielle LaBelle had an equally, if not more so, impressive debut. He actually led his film. And I think to me, this is why it's so important to understand how critical it is, how critical of a role these critics and these pundits and these Oscarologists play in setting the tone for the race. You know, I think there is a legitimate argument in the power of persuasion, and it happens here in this race all the time, and it happens every single year. Think how much more Spider-Verse could have done in this race if it wasn't so eliminated off the bat. Now, I grant you, and I was thinking the exact same way. Why would any serious-minded person who predicts this for a living seriously consider an animated film to get into Best Picture when they haven't done that in over 10 years? I understand. I get it. But if you keep talking about it as the best movie of the year and you keep promoting it and you keep, saying, don't just go along with it and just say it's ridiculous. You should be thinking about this as one of the best of the year. If you keep saying that enough times, that is going to have meaningful impact. That's my thinking anyway. And so it did serious harm to Gabrielle LaBelle that off the bat last year, because of his age, because of his, first movie ever role, despite the fact that he was in a front-runner film for Best Picture. This is a top 5 movie for Best Picture that ended up getting 7 Academy Award nominations. Despite all that, not one time was he seriously considered as a potential upset to sneak into that 5 for Best Actor. And it was never mentioned, but we were just so obsessed with other 2 names getting that last 5th spot. Tom Cruise for Top Gun Maverick, or Paul Mescal for Aftersun. And Paul Mescal ultimately ended up getting that nomination, but do you know why? Because the power of persuasion. The pundits kept pushing and pushing and pushing for that. He's also just happens to be a really popular young guy. He was also a young. I thought we can't nominate young guys in lead actor. Oops. I guess that was full of shit. Because we just did it with Aftersun. And the reason why was because his name was in the news the entire time. And why was his name in the news the entire time? Oh, because it was announced that he was going to star in the next Gladiator 2 movie. And it's the same bullshit of like, oh, look at The Whale, it's doing pretty well at the box office. It didn't make all that much, but it's doing pretty well, all things considered. It's like the straws that so many of them they grasp onto to prop it up. It's like, honestly, a lot of award season is just like making up math to make it sound like this movie's ahead, and then the lack of conversation for other films is a death sentence. That's ultimately what this is. And this is my frustration. It's like, it always just comes down to the things that I like the best that end up not getting the favor of these people. And they end up getting screwed because, like, in what world are we? And even in the podcasts that I hear a whole year later, they keep saying that, oh, Best Actor was so weak last year. The only other alternatives were like Tom Cruise and Paul Mescal, and like, it was not. It absolutely was not. But you definitely willed that into existence, didn't you? But if you had been propping up LaBelle the same way you had propped up Mescal, I wonder what would have happened. I wonder what would have happened. So, please, going back to Michelle and Lily, so even though it was beginning to look like she was about to dominate completely, and it definitely gave off a little bit of that impression when she won at the Golden Globes, on top of winning so many regional critics prizes, there was always something that lingered in the back of my mind back in November, and I think it's kind of starting to come. Well, it already has, really, in effect, started to come to fruition in a bit. The race is not over, by the way. I do want to be clear about that. There's no winner being declared, but the idea is it is an open race, and I feel strongly that part of the reason it's an open race is because there are enough people in the industry out there who do not see this performance as a lead performance, and there also may, as it turns out, be enough people in the industry who feel that the film that she's in is not something that they are going to prioritize to give an award to, or just didn't necessarily care about it all that much in comparison to others. That's, I think, what may be transpiring here, because on Golden Globes night, both Emma Stone and Gladstone won their respective genre categories, but on the Critics' Choice, it's kind of a shocker. I was expecting it to be a sweep at that point because, well, it looked like, but as I said last time, underestimate Emma Stone at your own peril. And what happened? She ended up winning and surprising everybody, including herself. Now, I think, as some people have observed, it is fair to say that she kind of gave the Cate Blanchett suicide speech, because I think ultimately what happened at last year's Critics' Choice, Cate Blanchett also beat Michelle Yeoh, who ended up winning the Oscar, Michelle Yeoh. But when Cate Blanchett went up there, she basically gave a speech that was all the equivalent to, I don't want to win this, so I'm going to use this speech to prop up everybody else. Bye. And then she never won again. She was never heard from again. That was it. Emma Stone didn't necessarily come on that strong. I mean, she started off giving like Lily and Carrie and Greta and all these other people in her category, and Margot, she was shouting them out. But then she actually turned it around into a really good acceptance speech and thanking her team and Yorgo Lanthimos. So even if even when she won, it was like, oh, but she gave the Cate Blanchett suicide speech. That might actually encourage some voters to like think it's okay that they have Emma's permission to vote for Lily instead. So it's like, okay, well, it's still not necessarily that well known at this point what's going to go. But then something far more substantial happened, which was the British Academy, the BAFTAs, had their own nominations. These are also people who I hate because last year, for whatever reason, they did not like The Fabelmans. They only nominated it for one thing. They have had a track record of the last 20 years of being very anti-Spielberg. He wasn't even on the long list, or the short list, I should say, for Best Director, which made everybody else in the pundit space completely change their track about who could win. And as soon as they repeat the same things over and over and over again, what happened? Spielberg dropped in the odds, and the Daniels rose, and that's all she wrote, and that was a sweep. And really, the BAFTAs deserve the most credit for assassinating Steven Spielberg's chances at winning Best Director last year, and that's something that I will never forgive them for. I know it's not that serious. Get a grip. But I take this stuff to heart. So, I mean, you best believe if look, I take the same approach, I think as most people would. If one of your favorites ends up being like completely eviscerated by a group, you're not going to forget that. And you shouldn't forget that. Because what happened this year? Oh, they went yet again for another one of mine. In a way that when I read the tweet that morning, I was like, oh yeah, that's totally the shit they would pull. That's totally the shit they would do to me. So it ended up being that even though they nominated Flower Moon for 9 awards, the BAFTAs, it ended up being omitted, that means left off, in 3 major categories, actually 4 major categories. One of those was actually not that big of a surprise. Leo was not included in Best Actor, and I do want to say, because I'm going to share some of my predictions later on, I am very... I feel it's going to be unfortunate that if Leo ends up being left off Best Actor, it's only going to validate, this popular idea that he is not really all that special in Flower Moon. And I fundamentally just disagree. I think he gave one of his best performances in that movie, but that's not how it's being seen. That's not how it's going to be seen once that terrible thing happens. But he was left off Best Actor. They didn't nominate Martin Scorsese in the screenplay or in the directing category. We're here again. Just a personal attack, literally. And then even going even further, they chose to not nominate Lily Gladstone for Best Lead Actress in a category that had 6 names in it. If Killers of the Flower Moon ends up being The Fabelmans 2.0 and walks away from the Oscars with 10 plus nominations and 0 wins, they have no one to thank but the BAFTAs for personally delivering that defeat to them. Which makes it the second year in a row where they completely fuck over my favorite movie. Oh, man. I think Peter may have been onto something about these Brits. I gotta tell you. And he himself, I was texting with him when these nominations came out. And I believe he said something to the effect of like how the race is going pretty nice, and then the BAFTAs completely fuck everything over. And yeah, that's kind of what happens. And so now we're at a point where, there's no question that Lily is going to get the nomination, but is she now going to get the win is even more of an open question. Because the Critics' Choice is a loss that can absolutely be withstood. Even losing the BAFTA could have been withstood, but not even getting nominated for the BAFTA and not even being saved by that jury process is eye-opening. Now this could end up backfiring in a different way and end up, bolstering support for Lily because of how things have panned out, but it does suggest that there are gaps in her support throughout the industry as we've been going along. And the more we've been going along in this season, and as we've heard from all of the groups now, her frontrunner status is in serious jeopardy at this point. It's actually, I think some people have already gone over and put Emma in first. And I gotta say, I don't see Poor Things winning too much of anything. I feel like, I think someone put it quite plainly, Poor Things and Flower Moon are kind of battling out for its one and only win in the actress category, which I think is absolutely absurd because both films are among the best of the year and should be in contention for more than just one win. At the same time, Oppenheimer's getting 8 or 9 wins. Fucking ridiculous. When I say fucking ridiculous, I mean not that Oppenheimer isn't deserving of those wins. I'm just like, well, why does it get to have that many and some other great films get to have nothing? That's the point, ultimately. I'll never forget, of course, at the BAFTAs, they were the ones who were responsible for really bolstering All Quiet on the Western Front, a film that is just like a nothing. And because of that, it ended up winning 4 Oscars. Because again, BAFTA, this is the thing that's the most upsetting, is that BAFTA, more than any of the other groups, has the most overlap in membership with the Academy Awards. So a lot of those BAFTA people and their taste, quote unquote, is gonna infiltrate and actually break through and heavily sway what some of those results are going to be at the Academy, which is why the Academy ended up giving All Quiet on the Western Front 4 awards, including for Best Score, the blah, blah, blah. That ended up, that was just that one score over literally everything else. And we have the BAFTAs to thank for that personally. So I don't know. I don't, and no one should anticipate this affecting the nominations that Flower Moon will receive, but it does heavily damage its ability to actually win anything due to these omissions. And again, the power of persuasion. This whole weekend, these same people are going on their shows and unveiling their Oscar nominations, and guess what's happening? All of a sudden, all these people are not including Eric Roth and Scorsese's screenplay for Flower Moon in adapted screenplay. All of a sudden, its perceived weakness at BAFTA is giving them reason to kick it out. Not that at this point it would change much of anything for the voting, but it does change its perception for how much of a contender it'll actually be when the voting for wins starts to happen. So again, that's just even more damage on top of it. So yeah, the BAFTAs, I will say though, did some good with films like Anatomy of a Fall and The Zone of Interest getting a lot of support, both films that are very much deserving of the attention that they're getting. I know that I have not seen Zone yet. It's one of the few contenders that I have not seen, but Anatomy I have, and it is a great movie. And I'm very happy to see some support And and it goes to show you, by the way, that again, a lot of people want to dismiss the Golden Globes as having no sense of relevancy or impact, but no one was expecting that win for screenplay at all. It was sixth in the odds on Gold Derby. It won, and now guess what? After that, and it ended up being indicative of support widespread in the industry, and now it is being favored as the winner for original screenplay at the Academy Awards. Oops, I guess that's a little bit influential. But if it does, congratulations, because it's very much deserving of. But it's also being talked about for nominations in editing and picture, and then also in director for Justine Triet, which is also kind of funny to me because, of course, that is just rubbing in the face of France, who stupidly made the decision to not select that as their official film, so it doesn't even have a chance to be nominated for international film because that wasn't their submission. Which, again, I've actually been going through a lot of the selections for international films lately, and I do think that this particular year is a banner year for amazing international films, that it is time to completely overhaul this particular category. The idea that a country only gets to submit one movie for the Academy is ridiculous. I think Peter was correct. Extend that up to 5, because Japan had a good 4 or 5 films that should have been considered. And France evidently was, this also was the reason why RRR wasn't even in this category last year, because India didn't select it. They had something else that no one even heard of, and no one ever will because of that. Didn't even get nominated. So, absolutely embarrassing. There's also even some predictions that suggest that Japan's choice, Perfect Days, as good as it may be, I haven't seen it yet, may itself find it being left off the list. For other films that Japan had, like Godzilla -1 or The Boy and the Heron. Ridiculous. So, yeah. And then there's the other thing. This whole Barbie situation. Which, if I'm going to be honest with you, I kind of am really sad about, because between the BAFTAs not going that crazy for it, and then these pot shots that apparently were taken at by Ruben Östlund. Yeah, good choice picking that guy to be nominated for director the other year. Saying that it was like attacking it, basically. I'm not sure what the comments were, but they were. I read them and they were very negative. It is indicative of something that we had suspected and we had feared from the first day we saw that film, that there was going to be significant gaps in its support, that there were going to be a number of members in the Academy who were just going to fundamentally reject that film as a serious movie and therefore a serious contender. And unfortunately, due to these developments, and even despite the fact that Greta has gotten in mostly everywhere except for this BAFTAs, most people have now eliminated their support for her and are predicting her to be left off the final 5 directors nominated, which I feel is maybe more so than any of the other ones. This one is just gonna be a bad look, because how can it not? Barbie's gonna receive a lot of nominations. I don't think it's gonna win much of anything. And I'm not even saying Greta was ever going to win, but she ended up creating one of the most unique cinematic experiences ever put to screen, and ended up turning in a beloved art, or auteur movie wrapped around a blockbuster 4-quadrant picture, and it somehow ended up working. The idea that this even exists and works the way that it does is a directorial feat in and of itself, and should be considered as such. And it's not, evidently, and that honestly kind of breaks my heart. I feel like Greta getting snubbed for director kind of even feels a bit worse than if Margot were to end up getting snubbed for actress. Although on the other hand, because Margot has actually been getting in everywhere, she now stands a good chance of getting in for actress, which is good because nobody wants an outcome where only Ryan Gosling gets nominated and Margot Robbie does not. That being said, of course, we got to keep in mind that if Margot Robbie ends up getting Best Actress, she's basically taking Greta Lee from Past Lives' spot, which again is just disappointing and uncomfortable. So with that, I know we had already a couple of tangents in there, but who is ahead, Emma or Lily? Well, I guess right now you got to say it's Emma, and you saw the love for Emma Stone in those rooms for Critics' Choice and for the Golden Globes and BAFTA and SAG. I mean, I guess at this point, if you look at that category for the BAFTAs, I think it's already assured Emma Stone is going to win that BAFTA. At that point, she will be the Golden Globe winner, the Critics' Choice winner, and the BAFTA winner. It's already kind of creating a bit of an undeniable energy to her, I guess, her supremacy at this point in the race, which tells you that Lily Gladstone needs to win that Screen Actors Guild Award. If she doesn't win that, it may very well be over for her. Opening up my phone here so I can share with you what I currently have for these predictions. I'm using the Award Expert app that you can download anywhere. I think Brother Bro were the ones who created this. It's really a nice feature, and I'm glad somebody did because it's just nice to have this presentation available instead of just me and my notes as I usually do. So okay, I'm gonna go through these and I'm just gonna lay them all out at you. Okay, so the 10 films that I have in for picture, my predictions: Oppenheimer, The Holdovers, Poor Things, Barbie, Killers of the Flower Moon, Anatomy of a Fall, Past Lives, Maestro, American Fiction, and The Zone of Interest. No other movie really stands a chance at coming in here. It just hasn't happened. All the other alternatives are weak. May December has flatlined with SAG and BAFTA. It's basically been knocked out. Color Purple, everybody hated it apparently because it's not getting in anywhere. Spider-Man, they don't like animated films in this category apparently. Saltburn, too divisive. Iron Claw, never got off the ground. All of Us Strangers, not enough support. Air, again, not enough support. So that's it. I don't see anything else getting in for picture. So that's that. For director, I have Chris Nolan, Oppenheimer, Scorsese for Flower Moon, Yorgos Lanthimos for Poor Things, Alexander Payne for The Holdovers, and Jonathan Glazer for The Zone of Interest. This is so unbelievably upsetting to me that I don't think Greta at this point stands a chance anymore to get in. And then The Holdovers is something else where I'm just like, it's now essentially moved in as the main challenger to Oppenheimer. And I gotta be honest with you guys, I am feeling a lot of resentment and envy because this film is a very good movie. Great even in spaces, with great performances that deserve to be nominated and in some cases win. I don't understand what is going on where this movie is performing as good as it is over literally every other film in this category, which I feel is far better. Maestro notwithstanding, obviously, that's a movie that I feel like shouldn't even be anywhere near this conversation, but it is and it will be because of the popularity of Cooper, and that's that. But Holdovers, I've seen it now twice, and I gotta say, it's just not captured it hasn't dazzled me the way that it has everybody else. I kind of feel like what's going on? I think where the envy is coming from is that this movie is really beginning to perform the way that people thought Fabelmans would have performed last year, but just didn't, and that film just did not connect and did not resonate with audiences at the way that this movie is. And part of me, I will say, I'm just jealous because like. But why, though? You know, Fabelmans is a far more... Well, I guess it works out because it is a far more interesting movie. And I think people are going to be looking back on that movie quite more fondly than this because Holdovers is pretty... I do not want to use the word generic because that's just not fair. But it is standard Academy fare. It is the standard Academy fare that a lot of people were accusing the Fabelmans of being. And yet... this film is just beloved. But I just don't understand how this is more beloved than Past Lives, Poor Things, Barbie even, Flower Moon. Or Anatomy of a Fall. It absolutely kind of confounds me. The same way it confounds me that Da'Vine Joy Randolph is winning everything. She was great in the film. But her winning every award for supporting actress is just like, well, I guess she's the obvious one. I don't feel that way. There were amazing supporting actress performances. What about Danielle Brooks or Taraji P. Henson in The Color Purple? They were, I'm sorry, they were better than Da'Vine Joy Randolph. Also, Da'Vine wouldn't be winning if Lily Gladstone had just remained in supporting right now. And there wouldn't even be a risk of Lily Gladstone losing an Oscar if she had remained in supporting, because she would have been winning everything. So, yeah, which more to the point, Alexander Payne being in here over Greta Gerwig is gross, over Justine Triet, over Celine's song, not great. All right, for actress, my predictions are Emma Stone, Lily Gladstone, Sandra Hüller for Anatomy of a Fall, Carey Mulligan for Maestro, and Margot Robbie for Barbie. I would love if Carey... I would swap Carey for Greta Lee, but that's just not happening. In actor, I have Cillian Murphy for Oppenheimer, Paul Giamatti for Holdovers, Bradley Cooper for Maestro, Colman Domingo for Rustin, and Leonardo DiCaprio for Flower Moon. Again, Leo, I'm not at that point where I'm going to just remove him. Everybody else is, because he missed SAG and BAFTA, and it may very well be that he's already been eliminated. But I just feel like he's Leo. He doesn't really miss. So, yeah, Fabelmans didn't really miss many nominations last year, and even though Killers is going to follow that same trajectory, I don't think it'll miss key categories. I'm not quite sure if Jeffrey Wright is strong enough to unseat him, but the other four are good, and I'm most happy for Colman Domingo because he is somebody who is a tremendous presence and has been working for a very, very long time, and so him being in here is more so for him, because he gave a great performance in Rustin, but it's not a great film, obviously, so, but again, he's been out there enough. He's had 2 big roles this year with that and Color Purple. It's definitely like, it's time to give this guy something. So I would be very happy to see him be included in this list. Supporting actress, Da'Vine Joy Randolph, Danielle Brooks for The Color Purple, Emily Blunt for Oppenheimer, Penelope Cruz for Ferrari, and Jodie Foster for Nyad. Those last two. I would prefer others like Claire Foy in All of Us Strangers, or Rosamund Pike in Saltburn, even America Ferrera. I don't even care. Fuck it. That would be far more interesting. But these two, Penelope Cruz and Jodie Foster, are beloved individuals in this industry. Their films are not great, or not being responded to the way that they would you would like to see, to even put them in positions of being predicted in the first place. But they are that well known and that well beloved that I think that by itself will coast to them to filling out these last 2 spots in this category. Supporting actor, RDJ Oppenheimer, Ryan Gosling Barbie, De Niro for Flower Moon, Dafoe for Poor Things and Ruffalo for Poor Things. I am not taking off Ruffalo. I'm not going to put Sterling K. Brown. I'm not going to put Charles Melton. And I'm not going to put Dominic Sessa. If it ends up that this burns me, whatever. I'm not going to consider anybody else. Original screenplay: Anatomy of a Fall, The Holdovers, Past Lives, Maestro, and Saltburn. This one I may end up changing. I don't know. I'm thinking of just putting in May December back in here because you would think it would get something in here. So, but that's ultimately what this comes down to, is those 6 films. Adapted: Oppenheimer, Barbie, Flower Moon, Poor Things, American Fiction. That's it. There could be a potential spoiler in All of Us Strangers in this category. Because of how well it did at BAFTA. Not overwhelmingly well, but it did very well at BAFTA. It could sneak in here. I don't know what the hell it would unseat, but it could happen in here, which I did see that, by the way. And it has already become one of my favorite movies of the year, All of Us Strangers, directed by Andrew Hay, starring Andrew Scott, and Paul Mescal, Jamie Bell, and Claire Foy. It is a powerful film. It is a very emotional movie. There were so many people who were sniffling and crying all around me when I saw it last week. There was even this woman who was so overcome and she couldn't stop crying that she had to like excuse herself, I think twice, because of how much it was making her cry. I felt really bad for her. I don't know if it triggered some kind of emotional traumatic thing that just happened to her. I don't know what, I can't speak to it, but it was a really good movie. And already one of my favorites of the year. International feature have Zone of Interest, The Taste of Things, Society of the Snow, 20 Days of Mariupol, and Fallen Leaves. I have seen, I think, only 2 of these. I need to check out some of the other films. I know that in the international film space, I have seen some of these. I don't know if some of these have made the long list or not. Let me just check them out here. No, I don't think Monster is on here, but I did see Monster and I did see The Teacher's Lounge. Both are very good and worth checking out. I do need to see Fallen Leaves and Society of the Snow and Taste of Things, among other ones, for sure. But I think this is what that one's going to be. Animated feature got Spider-Man, Boy and the Heron, Elemental, Nimona, and Turtles. Cinematography of Oppenheimer, Zone of Interest, Flower Moon, Maestro, and Poor Things. Editing: Oppenheimer, Flower Moon, Poor Things, Holdovers, and Anatomy of a Fall. Production design: Barbie, Poor Things, Oppenheimer, Flower Moon, and Zone of Interest. Costume design: Barbie, Poor Things, Flower Moon, Napoleon, and Oppenheimer. Makeup and hairstyling: Maestro, Poor Things, Oppenheimer, Flower Moon, and the Society of the Snow. Visual effects: creator, Guardians 3, Godzilla -1, Indiana Jones, and Society of the Snow. Sound: Oppenheimer, Flower Moon, Maestro, Ferrari, Zone of Interest. Score: Oppenheimer, Flower Moon, Spider-Verse, Zone of Interest, and Indiana Jones. Original song: 2 from Barbie, What Was I Made For, and I'm Just Ken. From Rustin, Road to Freedom. From The Fire Inside, that's the Diane Warren obligatory spot for Flamin' Hot. And then Quiet Eyes, Past Lives. Documentary short, I have the ABCs of Book Banning, The Last Repair Shop, The Barber of Little Rock, Black Girls Play a Story of Hand Games, and Camp Courage. For animated short, I have Letter to a Pig, Once Upon a Studio, Pete, War is Over, and Dog Apartment. And then for the live action short, I have The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, The Anne Frank Gift Shop, The After, Red, White, and Blue, and The Shepherd. So that's just quickly running through what I think is going to happen in some of these categories. But they may very well just end up being completely nonsense, and surprises may happen by the time I get to Tuesday. So yeah, that's kind of where we are. So I'm gonna, still be checking out some of these films for the next month or so. I don't know what the first big movie is going to be of this new year yet, because again, as I've been saying, that Januaries to me are not really the beginning of the new year for movies. That's more so like February or even sometimes in March, because I'm just like, I've been catching up on a lot of the short films and the documentary films, and there's still so many to see. I've seen a lot, and there's still a lot to see. It's kind of like really overwhelming, because it kind of almost feels like there's no end in sight. I mean, I still haven't seen Zone of Interest. I still haven't seen May, December, even though I can. I haven't seen Society of the Snow, or Perfect Days, or Fallen Leaves. And so I'm just, wanting to check those out, and hopefully get to them in time to see if any of those end up producing any kind of meaningful wins. Anyway, we're gonna go ahead and end it off there. Just a short one for you guys, just to give you something, and then we'll be back next week for more content and more Stay Under Our Spotlight every single Sunday for more podcasts. And we'll see you next time. Bye bye.